We are ready to start, and I want to welcome everybody for being here, for making the time as part of this commemoration of the 30 years of the ratification of the Mediterranean Music Studies Group. I am Vanessa Paloma Elbaz, and an incoming chair and previous vice chair, and Salvatore Morra is here with us as well, who's the current vice chair, incoming vice chair, and previous secretary. And we are thrilled to have current and past ICTMD presidents with us, and the previous chair people of the music study group, of the Mediterranean Music Study Group, with us today, as well as a great number of the original participants from the initial study group meetings in Venice. So the idea behind this gathering today is to think about the original impulses that Tullia Magrini had in forming this study group, and the ways that that has shaped our discipline, and the ways that that you all, and that now hopefully the continuation of the study group will continue to usher that through the development of the discipline in the working on the materials of the Mediterranean in sound and dance. So I don't want to take too much time to discuss that, because we'll have more time at the end to talk further, and for interventions of other members of the study group that were also in Venice, but that aren't from this original list of people that were on that program that we all received. But part of what I'm really interested in doing is that we really consider how we can dialogue and build towards the future with a real root in that original seed. And it's been so wonderfully done throughout the various generations of the study group, with the chairmanship of Marcello and of Ruth, with whom I worked with quite closely for the last 5 years. I had the great pleasure and honor of working quite closely with Ruth. So I will now pass it on to Salvatore, who wants to who will then have a contribution as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm also very happy to be able to welcome you to this 30 years Mediterranean Music Study Group commemoration. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Salvatore Morra, and as Vanessa said, I'm the current vice chair of the group. And again, thank you very much for being here. This is really a great, let me say, great support that we feel today from you, and for the future work of this group. Our next symposium will be the 15th symposium of this group, which is great achievement, and it's on the theme "The Body in Action," and will be hosted by Antonio Pasqualino International Puppet Museum in collaboration with ISMEO, the International Association for Mediterranean and Oriental Studies. Will be held in Palermo, in Italy, again, as the first meeting in Venice. As Vanessa already said, the conversation is recorded, and it will last about 40 minutes, 1 hour, after which we will take audience questions. And at any time during the event, you can use the chat features on your screen to submit your questions. And for now, please mute yourself during the talk. So now it is my pleasure to welcome the speakers, and Vanessa.
Yes, so we would like to start with the ICTM executive. And so I invite Svanibor Petan. Thank you so much for being here as the current president, and as one of the founding members of the study group as well. Thank you, Svanibor.
Thank you so much, dear Vanessa and Salvatore. I think this is a remarkable thing that you organized, that you brought us all together at the 30 years. And I think this study group, the Mediterranean Music Studies, are so representative in so many respects that I think many other study groups can get some good lessons actually from Mediterranean music studies. And I was very fortunate, first of all, to meet Tullia and to have also some ways of collaboration with her. But also later, you could really feel the personalities of the chairs that followed, with Marcello, for example, and then with Ruth, and of course with the two of you, but also including Alessandra Ciucci and Cassandra Baloso and Odette and the other people also involved in the history of this group. Yes, so passato e presente. Yeah, so this was the meeting in 1995, and I didn't present any paper at that meeting, but it was my professor, Jerko Bezic, from Zagreb, and I remember this was really very remarkable. This collaboration between Tullia, who found a good home for the study group, and so the Fondazione Levi was very meaningful, very helpful. And she brought a fantastic group of people, so covering the whole Mediterranean space. And one detail that just came to my mind recently when I was thinking about this. So Erich Stockmann, who was the president at that time, and Dieter Christensen, who was the Secretary General, were also among the participants. So I can move to the next slide. Can you see maybe it is not big enough. And so I finished my PhD just a few years before that. And then when I came there, just after coming from a walk, Erich Stockmann and Dieter Christensen came towards me, and we were all excited, to see each other. And I remember I was thinking, so which hand should I give to anybody? Because they all gave me their hand at the same time. And then I gave one to the left and the other one the right. And it was so important. And I think this was also one of these touching moments, that made me think also about the future, about serving the council in so many capacities. Because the two of them were also such a symbol of passing the boundaries, crossing the borders, one being East German, the other one West German in that sense, later moving to America. And so this was really nice. And if you see just the names, of course, of the participants, you can see that really the whole Mediterranean basin was well covered. And some of you who participated, of course, are present here. I think I also have one picture. I'm not sure whether this is from the same event, but I think it is Fondazione Levi, isn't it? And I can see Ruth and Phil, and then many other dear colleagues also coming from Croatia, like Joško Čaleta and Mojca Piškor, and so on and so on. And then I just wanted to show you something else. Another journal that we usually don't talk so much about, it's Ethnomusicology Online, which was in the style kind of similar to Anthropology of music in Mediterranean, yeah. And here is also, I think, something that we reported in one of these meetings. See, with Phil, with Tullia, and Amnon Shiloach, Karl Signell. Signell was actually instrumental in bringing this Mediterranean volume actually to one of these ethnomusicology online journals. And then, of course, well, I have to say that I love Tullia's article here about Kostas Papadakis and his moves and change of his identity. you know, just so well representing her anthropological approach and so. But on the other hand, I really admire that this study group really brings together the anthropologists and ethnomusicologists and historical musicologists. And for example, also having the one of the symposia together with the IMS. And I'm glad to see that Dinko Fabris is also with us, who was also very, very important in bringing these two major societies together. Vanessa, I think one of the points that you wanted to make us, so how do we see the future? What can we recommend maybe in that sense? Now at the moment, ICTM has as many as 27 study groups. So 27 vibrant organisms, so to say, and 11 of them are defined geographically, such as Mediterranean music studies, and 16 of them thematically, like applied ethnomusicology, music and minorities, and so on. And I can see that we can really think maybe of some joint symposia also in the future. Once in ICTM, in my ICTMD experiences, I think one that I particularly remember was in Vietnam, where the music and minorities and applied ethnomusicology joined forces. This was a phenomenal event. Later, we made in Beijing, like applied ethnomusicology and music education and social inclusion. It also worked very well. And with Mediterranean music studies, I see that it could work very well with Arab music study group and also Makam music study group. And nevertheless, Southeast European study group in the first place. But of course, also all these study groups that we have in the group of 16 thematically defined ones, of course, would be very nice partners. We just in December had a very successful, I can say, symposium of the music and minorities and indigenous music and dance in Sri Lanka, in Colombo. And we used a different concept, like indigenous music studies joined us only for one day. And then it worked so well that we are invited next year to the symposium of the indigenous music and dance study group with one day again, like the same pattern, but the next year. And all these experiences, I think, are very good intellectual exercises. They worked very, very well in combining, in bringing together people. So I would recommend it. We will say many, many nice words, I think, about Tullia today, but I would maybe just show some of her. I love her introduction that I still use in my classes from this book. And I also fondly remember also, of course, Phil's and Marcello's work on this one with Loris, of course. That is a very, very nice tribute to her legacy, to everything that she did for the successful life of the study group. And thanks to these high quality roots, I can say we are together today. And I can just express like very, very best wishes now to the new leadership of the study group in bringing the study group to the new heights. I think I shouldn't continue anymore because there are also other colleagues who would like to talk. And I thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so very much, Svanivor. And it's wonderful to have you, and for all these, the photograph is great also to make it come alive, because we've heard so much about these meetings, but to actually see them and we've read about them, we've read the texts, but to actually see the images of the ways that you were interacting is also really great. So now we would like to ask Salwa.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this celebration. And I want to, first of all, thank Vanessa for organizing this commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Mediterranean Music Study Group, which, as I see it, is really one of the most dynamic and active ICTM groups since its founding. And I'm also, of course, delighted to see so many good friends and so many of you who have who joined us and who feel like we do that this is a really important study group from which we learned and from which we also in which we shared many wonderful experiences, musical and also personal, emotional. So I will, as Vanessa said and recommended, focus more on the initial phase and on Tullia's vision as I saw it then. So in my reading, thanks to her vision and leadership as founder and chair of the study group from 1992 to 2005, our dear colleague Tullia Magrini and the chairs who continued and developed the group's activities, Marcello, Sorche Keller, and Ruth Davis, and more recently, of course, Vanessa, we have a dynamic and very active study group. For me, it's an honor and a pleasure to make a few personal remarks on this special occasion and to share this commemoration with such wonderful colleagues and friends, but most importantly, to pay homage to the study group's founder and mentor for over a decade, Tullia Magrini. The study group's history, symposia, and publications are beautifully delineated in Ruth Davis's chapter on the study group, published in the volume entitled Celebrating the International Council for Traditional Music, Reflections on the First 7 Decades, edited by Svanibor Petan, Naila Seribacic, and Don Niles, and it was published by the University of Ljubljana in 2022. I was fortunate, as you could see on the program, to be invited to the first symposium of the Anthropology of Mediterranean Music and Culture, as the group was then named, held at the Fondazione Levi in Venice in 1995. I was already familiar with the study group's mission and potential, as I was on ICTM's board in 1993, when the study group of the Anthropology of Music in the Mediterranean Cultures was enthusiastically recognized, as the terminology went at the time, as an ICTM study group. The 1995 symposium was inspirational in so many ways. This is when I met Tullia for the first time. Her enthusiasm, her sense of mission, and the clarity of her vision about the study group's goals and priorities were inspiring, both personally and professionally. Her idea of constituting, and I'm quoting from the Italian introduction to the program, the human and social aspects of sound activities. And here I really want to underline the human because the social, yes, we were always thinking as ethnomusicologists that the social context, the cultural context, and so forth. But the human, I think, is a very telling word. And then the sound activities. Her emphasis on sound is truly visionary for the time. So both past and present across the Mediterranean region as an object of study from an anthropological perspective. This was pioneering at the time. Studying borderland societies, circulation, migration, mobility, and contact zones across the Mediterranean was fundamental then, as it is now. It allowed me to connect several strands of my own research in Egypt and Portugal that until then seemed unrelated. Tullia and I also shared several academic challenges, establishing modern ethnomusicology in our universities. Tullia, of course, in Bologna, and I in Lisbon, both Southern European countries that had a very strong folklore tradition of collecting very prominent figures, Lady and Capitella in Italy, and Michel Giacometti, and the composer Lopes Graça in Portugal, among others. That kind of established an idea, even if the word ethnomusicology circulated, but an idea of ethnomusicology that didn't correspond to the vision of the 80s, certainly not the 80s and 90s. Also, the idea of creating synergies between historical musicologists and ethnomusicologists who work on Mediterranean cultures and maybe on other aspects as well. I mean, again, this was a time in which the two disciplines, or these were seen as two disciplines rather than a large study area of music studies where we approach music in different ways. As we know, many ethnomusicologists are also historians, and many musicologists are increasingly ethnographers. So she really had that insight early on, and the program is a good reflection of that, having historical musicologists, ethnomusicologists, having also young scholars and more experienced scholars in the same room, in the same event. Lots of debate. This was really a meeting where there was time for presentation and time for debate. Finally, Tullia's emphasis on the anthropological approach, which she defended and she demonstrated in her own work. It was fundamental in shaping the ways we think about music and more broadly about sound across such a vast and diverse region. Following Tullia's passing, I kept close touch with the study group, participating in some symposia and hosting the group symposium in Lisbon in 2012 on the theme Musical Insularity, how it favors conservation, how it triggers innovation. This was when Marcello was chairing. With Marcello, we also organized a colloquium, though the theme is precisely, you know, it really fits very nicely in the kinds of concerns of the Mediterranean Music Study Group. And I think there were several study group members as well. Pan-Mediterranean poetic competitions and their music, historical perspectives, and contemporary practice. This was organized in perhaps the most Mediterranean region in Portugal, that is Alentejo, because as you know, geographically, Portugal is really on the Atlantic, not the Mediterranean. It has no border, no Mediterranean border. However, culturally, especially southern Portugal, the region of Alentejo, where we celebrated this colloquium, and further down the Algarve, certainly in cultural terms and in many other ways, are really belong to the Mediterranean complex. So I could say much more about the important contribution made by Tullia, Marcello, and Ruth, but we were all warned by Vanessa not to exceed 5 minutes, preferably. So I'm not sure, I haven't been looking at my clock, but I will stop in view of time limitations, and I look forward to my colleagues' presentations and also to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And thank you. Yes, it's so interesting to hear a continuity between all the different voices and the different perspectives, but that connect. So this is why we wanted something short and move forward, and then to actually be able to discuss, to open the floor. So we would like Marcello now as the previous or the first study group chair after Tullia to intervene. Thank you.
Vanessa, thank you very much indeed for this opportunity to say a few words. I really appreciate this idea of commemorating and retracing, remembering the entire history of the study group. What can I say? Well, I would like to make you all aware of how unusual and in a way adventurous the beginnings of this study group really were. You see, Tullia Magrini was not only a talented scholar, she also had the practical ability to make many things happen. In fact, in the early 90s, she persuaded the Levi Foundation in Venice to host regular meetings devoted to the anthropology of music in the Mediterranean. Those meetings were immediately recognized by the ICTM as activities of a newly born study group. It really was grand at the time because, you see, the Levi Foundation offered an incredibly generous support, perhaps excessively so, because it later ran into financial difficulties, and its support eventually ended. Before that happened, Tullia prematurely passed away in 2005. At that point, Loris Azzaroni, who is Tullia's husband, himself a distinguished music scholar, asked me to fill in. You see, in order to keep things moving, it seemed helpful to have an Italian-speaking person functioning as a go-between between the Levi Foundation, the goose that laid the golden eggs, and the study group. It worked for a while. And in 2007, it was possible to organize a conference in honor and memory of Tullia, with the participation of Bruno Neru, Philip Bollman, Ruth Davis, among many others indeed. That was, if I'm not mistaken, the 7th meeting taking place in Venice. But shortly after, as I had just anticipated, the crisis came. And what a crisis it was. The Levi Foundation could no longer offer any support. We no longer had a luxurious venue offering room and board and full refund of traveling expenses. Can you just imagine? I was worried sick. But now, in retrospect, I can say it was a fortune in disguise, because the study group is, yes, rather poor, but no longer prisoner or anchored to Venice. I stayed on as chair. To some extent, I was the chair because, for the sake of truth, Ruth Davis gave me an enormous amount of support and did a lot of work with me. And then, thanks to help to Salwa El Shawan, we could have 2 symposia in Portugal, one later in Malta, thanks to Simon Mercia and Philip Chantar, one in Cambridge, thanks to Stefano Castelvecchi, who is an historical musicologist. At that point, I realized it was the right time for me to step down. The study group needed to get involved with the southern shore of the Mediterranean, and Ruth Davis was clearly the right person for the job. And she did wonderfully. Now, although I enjoy living like an urban hermit, I was about to say suburban, to some extent, I stay informed. I know what Vanessa has been doing professionally, and I have no doubt at all the study group is in very good hands with her. So, in other words, the study group lives on, and so lives on Tullia's legacy. It was Ruth Davis, who once pointed out to me how, before this study group existed, scholars working with Arab traditions or in the Balkans, Greece or Italy, had no acute sense of how their work might be seen as complementary. And complementary it is, if we look at the Mediterranean as Tullia did, as possibly the most problematic interaction area on Earth, a metaphor of sorts for the study of musical processes at their greatest thickness and turbulence. Conclusion. Tullia Magrini really was a good friend of mine. I'm therefore exceedingly happy to see that was what she initiated lives on so productively in the Mediterranean study group of today. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcello. That was beautiful. And Ruth, we're very much looking forward to hearing the continuity and your vision and your words on the study group.
So first of all, thank you everyone who's spoken until now. Thank you, Vanessa. I'm slightly taken aback by you, Marcello, the lovely things you said. I think of it the other way. I have to thank you. I owe you a lot for your invitation to come on the journey with you to take the study group forward at that particular juncture. I want to, first of all, congratulate Vanessa and Salva for their recent election, the first time that we had formal elections a la ICTM regulations. And I'm so happy that you both are in the positions of chair and vice chair. When I stepped down as chair in Marseille in June, Vanessa reminded me that this was indeed the 30th anniversary of the ratification of our study group by the ICTM, actually to the month, June 1993. And I say reminded me, but actually the association hadn't even occurred to me, despite the fact that I think, as Salva mentioned, I'd only just written a history of our study group for the celebratory ICTM volume, celebrating the past 7 decades. That connection had escaped me altogether. Typically, Vanessa, who is so invested in her work, in all her professional projects, in the legacy of the past and its continuity in the present and projection into the future, it took Vanessa to make that association and to build on it, and therefore to bring us all together today to celebrate it. So thank you, Vanessa. I would like to draw attention again to that particular volume, not only because, as Salwa already pointed out, it includes a history of our study group. Of course, it's celebrating 7 decades of the ICTM altogether, but it celebrates the history of our study group in the context of the other study groups, 27 in total, like the EU. And really what you get for that, from that whole gathering of essays, is a sense of the diversity and the distinctiveness, the particular qualities of each study group. When you open when we open the ICTM website, it's almost as though we're confronted by this immense bureaucracy of organization. Yet, and so one almost feels overwhelmed by all these rules and regulations and statutes, etc., etc., etc. Yet, what actually is the case that is what the ICTM, I'm trying to put this into words that make sense. What I so much value about the ICTM is the space it offers for very particular approaches, very particular intellectual cultures. And I think the study groups really demonstrate this, like with a vividness that is so clear. I have to say that of all the study groups, perhaps ours is unique in the way it was conceived and founded, as others have described, against the backdrop of palaces and gondolas and the hospitality of the Levi Foundation. And as others have mentioned already, thanks so much to our founder, Tullia Magrini, for her vision, her determination, and her magnetic personality. I'm trying not to repeat too much what others have already said. I was not amongst the few absolutely founding scholars who met in the context of a meeting of the Italian ICTM Italy. So in the context of predominantly Italian scholars, Tullia invited 5 Anglophone scholars, Phil, Martin, 2 who are no longer with us, Bruno Nettel. Those 3 are, of course, ethnomusicologists, and also John Davis, the anthropologist in Finland, the historical musicologist, and really in so doing, really set a stamp on the methodologies that she wanted to stress in those early years. If we look at the themes of the ensuing conferences or symposia, there's very much a methodological focus looking at the interface of those particular disciplines, but more broadly, the temporal spatial interface, past, present, written, oral, and all in the context of the uniquely fertile territory offered by the Mediterranean. And as Salwa in particular, others have already noted, this was really pioneering in music studies. And all those who were involved really felt ourselves to be at the vanguard of at least of music studies, if not of Mediterranean scholarship, of course, more broadly. So let's see, jumping to, yes, I think I will jump to, well, I think maybe I just can't resist mentioning the way that I was introduced into this study group exactly in 1993, because it seemed to me in conversations afterwards that this was so typical of the experience of other scholars that this was in my case, it was at the World Conference in Berlin and of 1993. And Tullia literally pounced on me after well, not literally, but as if, after the panel that I was speaking on, and in one monologue told me everything I needed to know about the study group, issued an invitation to come to the next meeting in Venice, all expenses paid. Would I accept? Yes, of course I would. Done. And that was that. And from then onwards, I was involved. And she worked with that efficiency and that precision, I think, with so many of us. Just one aspect of her way that I think we all can't fail but remember. I'm going to jump now to the point where Marcello came into the picture. I think Marcello has already mentioned that we unwittingly or unknowingly found ourselves in 2 parallel initiatives. News of Tullia's passing reached us at the time of the World Conference in Sheffield. It happened to coincide, and we were both involved separately in initiatives to try to bring the study group together and discuss what to do. And it was Phil Bowman. Unsurprisingly, yes, it was Phil who brought Marcello and I together and into collaboration. And Marcello has mentioned the colloquium in Cambridge in 2008. And of course, the landmark event was the 2007 symposium in memory of Tullia, where we learnt the news that the Levi Foundation could no longer support us. I have to say, I remember this as being quite traumatic for the study group. I think we suddenly realized we were like spoilt children who were suddenly unleashed into the world and felt incapable of almost of functioning or knowing whether we even could function. And I can't exaggerate the huge amount of energy and determination that Marcello invested in making this work and showing that we could become and flourish as a normal study group. And in a way, this circumstance gave new breath to the study group. Marcello found for us new venues, greatly expanded participation. We started to collaborate with our Maltese colleagues, with colleagues in Portugal, hosted by Salwa and her students, again in Cambridge. Such was Marcello's energy that he also, there was I think there were 2 symposia that happened during Marcello's leadership. And of course, I had the enormous privilege of traveling alongside with Marcello as vice chair. I want to thank in particular at this point 2 senior colleagues who made the transition with us from the luxury, the spoiled luxury that we had. I don't want to use the word spoiled, but just the luxury, the support that we had, those years of the Levi Foundation's patronage in Venice, to becoming a normal study group. And I want to thank Salwa for your loyalty in supporting us through those years and participating with us in particular, and also Judith Cohen, who again came with us and has remained with us through those years, and also other scholars that for one reason or other were not able to, may not have been able to join us physically, but still gave their encouragement from the wings. Phil, Martin, Svanabor, Edwin, who actually did join us in Essaouira, and many others. I just feel that this continuity was an obstacle that other study groups didn't have to surmount, and we succeeded in surmounting it to, I think, great, and we are now continuing to reap the benefits of doing so. Before concluding, I want to pay tribute to particular qualities that I value about our study group and study groups in general that enable a very unique interaction to take place. The non-hierarchical format, the insistence on every session being a plenary session, as it were, not to run parallel sessions, and the culture of a more relaxed pacing that allows us really to get to know each other, to speak freely, to interact freely, and to establish relationships. I think all of us involved have benefited from encounters with colleagues that we have built upon, and have become, these relationships have become actually quite, they've become building blocks in our professional development and careers. And many younger scholars, or scholars that are relatively new to the study group, have actually mentioned this to me, and with appreciation, and sort of saying, well, but for this meeting, I would not have. Those sort of remarks have come so frequently. And I do think there is something very special about the culture of our study group, and I think study groups in general, the ICTM study group formats in general. I think I might be overspending my time, and I haven't even begun to mention the events from 2014 onwards. If I can whiz through them, this was when I took over as chair, and I had made a commitment to the study group to expand participation, if possible, to really try to include our scholars, our colleagues from the Maghreb, the Southern Mediterranean, and actually Francophone scholarship generally, which was quite meagerly represented in the ICTM at the time. And it seemed to be very clear that the problems were basically of access, the prohibitive cost of attending symposia, and of course other practical things like visas and against the backdrop of political instability in the region. Of course, there was nothing we could do about this last, but certainly greatly indebted to the ICTM. Svanabo especially, I know how much I was a bee in your bonnet about this business, trying to persuade you to try to see if the ICTM could actually provide some individual support for individual participation for symposia, as it had already been doing so for world conferences. And we were so delighted when this actually happened. Of course, the other point, the basic point, was to persuade an institution in Maghreb to host us. And the watershed moment was when Alessandra Ciucci managed to get our connection with Eswera and Andre Azoulay. I've written about this in the volume. I have to say, the volume that Salwa mentioned is downloadable for free, thanks to the publishers, University of Ljubljana. And I would urge you to do so, because the volume is a great resource. It has great riches in it altogether. And to get your libraries to invest in a hard copy, of course, which is also modestly priced for what you get. So I won't go more into detail, but again, gratitude to Alessandra, vice chair at the time, and then to Vanessa for building on this, keeping up this momentum, for organizing the next symposium in Tangier, which together with the American Legation and the Casbah Museum, which unfortunately had to be held online, but was a great success nonetheless because of the pandemic. And finally, Olivier and Séverine for organizing the symposium in Marseille, which proved to us how successful this initiative to involve our Maghrebi colleagues have been, in that they did not cease to come when we eventually held a symposium in Europe. And this wider participation has certainly become normalized.
And pass on to Philip Bowman. Thank you, Ruth.
I want to begin by thanking Vanessa and Salvatore for the invitation to do this. It's very, very special for me, a chance to reflect and to remember and to think ahead. I'm going to concentrate really on one aspect of what I'm calling the first generation, actually, of the study group, and that's publication. Something I believe really held the group together, defined it, and becomes a very important part of what makes it special. There are many reasons the study group gathered in Venice during its early years. Surely the intellectual and cultural hospitality of the Fondazione Levi among them. I've already reflected, as I've reflected on the history of the study group over the past few weeks, I came increasingly to muse about one of the reasons, one that perhaps I had previously overlooked, and that is Venice's crucial role in the emergence of Mediterranean print culture. So many areas of early modern print culture converged in Venice. Music printing, for example, and Jewish book culture, to name two that have been a part of my work in and around Venice, and areas of the history of publishing lovingly curated by the Fondazione Levi. We surely recognize the sea change in the history of print culture that Venice afforded. Today, among you, dear friends, I want to suggest that the background of that sea change was crucial to the emergence of our study group. During the foundational years, some of you will remember that there was great concern among members of the study group that the ICTM, then might have a certain wariness about the scope and subject area of the study group, the anthropology of music, the Mediterranean as space and history and culture. Not your typical study group. This was something that really concerned Tullia a great deal. And she got a lot of feedback, some of it negative about, is this a real subject for a study group? Can you really organize around the anthropology of music of a particular area? Where were the geographical, the national committees in all of this? No one was more engaged in proving the common ground for the study group, I think, than Tullia. It was Tullia's conviction, moreover, that the common ground's very fertility and its future lay in our ability to establish a common print culture for the anthropology of music in the Mediterranean. It was, moreover, one of Tullia's great successes that we witness when we reflect on the richness and diversity of publication that her convictions made possible. We often spent time at the early meetings in which we sat and talked about the possibilities of publication. This was something which was part of her organizational skill, really, to bring us together to talk about possibilities. And I'm going to just quickly sketch those in a moment. I remember those very well, especially because in getting to know Tullia, one of the great wonders about Tullia was that she did not eat garlic, and that she did not drink wine. And to sit in Venice eating pizza with Coke was just such a memory of my college years that I I immediately loved her. But Tullia, when she was a guest professor at the University of Chicago for a term, also then invested time and energy in engaging with the University of Chicago Press, thinking about the possibilities of what the study group could do. As in Venice, the print culture of the early study group brought about what I will call its sea change. So I just want to quickly sketch 4 volumes to sort of follow the streams in this, and I'll do a screen share if I may. Okay. I think I have to do this now. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
So this, I chose 4 volumes just to kind of follow from the earliest to the end of this generation, in a sense, which followed Tullia's death. And this, of course, is the first volume that appeared from 1993 with the theme of the study group as really the subject of the volume itself, laying the foundations for the study group. I don't know if anyone, Martin, you always had an eye for the visual aspects of Venice, remembering the posters around Venice with this very curious title on it, and wondering how many tourists really were going to stop in and listen to the papers. This a later 2000.
Oh, Phil, you've just muted yourself at CP, it seems. So just unmute yourself, please.
Sorry. I jumped ahead to 2002 to when Tullia turned to the journal Musica e Storia for some special issues, using them as part of this. She sought these other ways of finding special themes, bringing them into the study group. In this case, was one of the from a shared journal, a special issue, but was shared with some historical musicologists as well. Okay. It won't go on, but
Maybe click the little arrow to the left, on the bottom left.
yes, thank you. This is 2003. Again, one of Tullia's great plans, her ideas for publishing obviously the music and gender perspectives from the Mediterranean, which we published at the University of Chicago Press in Chicago Studies in Ethnomusicology. So again, spreading this out. And finally, the Gedenkschrift, the honor, the volume that Marcello and Loris and I edited, really to do honor to this incredible sweep, this idea that she had of building a study group on foundations that also included the way in which publishing reached and communicated to the field and far beyond. Thank you very much. I will yield then back to the floor.
Thank you, Phil. And we're now moving forward. I believe that it is Nico Staiti that we will hear from now.
Nice to meet you again, some of you, and for the first time others. Other colleagues, Salva, Svanibor, and others have spoken about the foundation and the history of this study group. And so I just will offer a small testimony, just to underline, I think, an aspect of the first events of the study group that are, for me, that I think are particularly significant. I attended the first meetings at Levi Foundation in the early 90s, and in these meetings, on several occasions, scholars from different backgrounds met in Venice. I was a quite young scholar, 30 years ago, and among the many meetings, I want to remember one in particular, thanks to Donatella Restani, that was that invited him. I had the pleasure and the honor to meet Jean-Pierre Vernant, the eminent historian of religions in the ancient world in Venice, in the Levi Foundation. During the lunch, we were sitting near, and so I told him that I was honored to meet him and to stay with him. He replied in French, "Honoré, je m'en fous." It means honored, I don't give a shit, maybe in English, no? If you like to chat with me, instead, that's much better than that. I want to recall this episode in particular, not only because it recounts something of the Vernant's qualities that doesn't emerge from his writings, but above all, because it gives an account of an aspect of those meetings that are particularly significant, and which I believe has much to do with a perspective of studies that is particularly important in Italy, and that from Italy went also in other countries. To which, indeed, I believe that the Italian tradition of studies has contributed in a significant way, both in terms of method and in terms of the objects studied. What I mean to say is that here, maybe earlier and more than elsewhere, we have tried to focus on the relationships between the ethnographic approach and the historical approach to the things of music. In Italy, the historical depth of every oral musical manifestation is evident. Since there is no musical form, repertoire, technique, performing technique, musical instrument, for which it doesn't appear necessary to compare material drawn from fieldwork with literary and figurative sources relating to a more or less ancient past. So Italy was the right place to start from in order to extend to the entire Mediterranean and the wider community of scholars, of ethnomusicologists and historians, an attitude that in an important way had taken shape here in Italy. Venice, of course, in a special way, also symbolically. So I think that those years were so important for the history of our disciplines. I believe that many paths have been traveled, even different ones. And some of the most important ones have centered on the activities of the ICTM. And activities of this study group, of the study group on Mediterranean music, are a very shining example of that. So I look forward to our next meeting in Palermo. That is another great Mediterranean city where historical sediments and current realities of different origins and nature will provide a magnificent setting for our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nico. Thanks. And also Donatella Restani was at the first meeting in the early 90s. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I enjoyed so much, Nico's, your memoir, de Venise. First of all, I would like to thank Vanessa and Salvatore for their invitation. Being here today gives me the opportunity to express once again my deep gratitude to Tullia Magrini. And as an historical musicologist, to express it in the perfect context among you. You invited me as a witness and a participant of that very first meeting of the study group on anthropology of music in Mediterranean cultures. This was the very early definition. Now, Mediterranean music at the Levi Foundation in Venice, where Tullia worked for over 10 years in the scientific committee, forging outstanding and innovative research activities, as everybody has already remembered. I would like to focus only on the title of that meeting, Passato e Presente, Past and Present, Perspective on the Anthropology of the Mediterranean Music. In this title, Tullia joined two dimensions of the musicological research, which until then had been rarely combined, the past and the present. It was a unique occasion for me, so young, 30 years ago, to present in an ethnomusicological context the role of music in Greek mythology, as a reflection of the fundamental role that music had in ancient Greek society, rites, and culture. Thanks to Tullia, for the first time, studies on ancient Greek music were considered in the context of research on contemporary Mediterranean music, having in common an anthropological methodological perspective. The line of research went far beyond the pioneers' expectations and involved scholars from different disciplines like archaeology, as shown by the recent essay, Singing the Past, Orchestrer le Passé, 2023, to which one of you contributed to. That 1995 meeting achieved another unexpected result. When I presented Alberto Gallo's project of research on travelers and music in antiquity and Middle Ages, I certainly did not expect that it would develop for 30 years, involving an ever-increasing and multidisciplinary group of scholars coming from the 5 continents and whose publications have appeared on journals as Musica Storia, Itineraria, books, proceedings, papers, and so on. The success of this line of research with different new names, such as From Odysseus to Darwin, Discovering Human Cultural Diversity Through Musical Experiences in Travelers' Narratives, is shown by an actual position for a young research fellow at the University of Padua, and the 2 different positions of PhD bursaries at the University of Padua and Bologna on their 3rd year nowadays. In the last 2 years, I was invited 3 times to speak about, and I don't know how many times I have shown this slide, which now I share with you. This one, which you knew very, very well, I think. Because this one is a Palazzo Giustinian Lolin. Can you see it? Yeah. Because this is Palazzo Giustinian Lolin, the Foundation Levi site. When the 1995 meeting was organized, Giulio Cattin was the enlightened director of the Levi Foundation Scientific Committee. The presence in that committee of my late friend, archaeologist François Lissarag, permitted to merge the subjects researched by Jean-Pierre Vernant, which Nico remembers, Vidal-Naquet, Lissarag's professor, and their research groups with the subjects examined by Tullia Magrini study group, such as the construction of identity, the representation of the past, and the meaning of tradition. I will end my short note, maybe. Oh, sorry. With some Tullia's words, which I hope I can share with you once more. No, I can't. But I can read, because you know them very well. I can read in Italian because they were put in the booklet of the very first meeting. Le intense dinamiche che hanno preso vita in questo territorio, il Mediterraneo, le interazioni, le trasformazioni che si sono attuate in questo spazio cruciale che unisce Africa, Asia e Europa, si riflettono nella variegata realtà musicale contemporanea, portando in campo i temi dei cambiamenti, della elaborazione dell'identità, della rappresentazione del passato e del significato della tradizione. I wish to the future of this study group all my best wishes. And thank you once more.
Thank you so very much. And thank you for taking us back to Italian also. I would like to, just in the interest of time, I'm continuing to hand over to Martin. And he said something actually as we were talking about this day, where he arrived and his whole bibliography of his PhD was standing before him. And I felt similarly when I first came in 2008 to Cambridge, and there was all these people that I had read, and finally they were humans in front of me. So it's really wonderful to hear how that's a shared experience. I'm sure that there are others in the Zoom room that feel the same way about even just being in the Zoom room with such a distinguished set of scholars. So thank you, Martin.
Yes, thank you very much. I was a Mediterraneanist from the outset, I believe, and I was led there by my Oxford PhD supervisor, Michael Gilsonen, an anthropologist who had worked at that point on Egypt and Lebanon during the Civil War. I should say it didn't feel entirely obvious to me, being a Mediterraneanist, as somebody working on modern Turkey, work here perhaps reflecting the situation after the 1980 coup in Turkey and the subsequent junta rule in that country, felt isolated and isolating. It was also complicated because it was to take a position in 1980s Oxford Anthropology's arcane and relentless culture wars, to make a statement about whether I aligned with the old guard, a coterie of Africanists and Mediterraneanists, or the new, a group of priestly structuralists led by Rodney Needham, deeply absorbed in reading Wittgenstein and primarily focused on Southeast Asia. One had to choose, again, it being Oxford. The anthropology of the Mediterranean then meant Campbell, Peristiani, Lison Tolosana, Pina Cabral, Pitt Rivers, Abu Zahra, Geertz's Sefru, Bourdieu's Kabyle, Evans, Pritchard's Cyrenaica, etc., etc. It had brilliant advocates in the then up-and-coming John Davis, RIP, who of course was a member of the study group in its early years, and Michael Hertzfeld. It was associated with a sensibility towards history, very much including the classical heritage, very much including what Brodel would call ecological time. It was associated with ethnographic experiment, reflexivity, writerly writing. It was also associated with the perilous territory of comparativism, of politics, of South-South conversations. It had its detractors, viz. The pugnacious debates in the pages of Critique of Anthropology in 1986, still worth reading, I believe. I had already chosen, of course, I'd made my choice, and I believe I had chosen wisely. The values of this anthropology have fared well. Those of a Wittgenstein-inflected structuralism less so. And these values meet the challenges of our time. When I received my first call from Tullia to the Italian ICTM meeting that Ruth recalled, thereby solving a bit of a mystery for me as to exactly when exactly I made my first appearance at this illustrious meeting, an occasion that I feel pretty sure also involved Tony Seeger, by the way, and I'd be very happy for anybody who can help me remember. Anyway, when I received this call, these anthropological commitments of mine were very firmly in place, but I had no idea, really, absolutely no idea what they might mean in musical or ethnomusicological terms. And I also had absolutely no idea what to expect when I turned up in Venice on that first occasion. Unprepared, coming from Belfast for the heat and humidity, for the neo-Baroque grandeur of the Fondazione Levi, and for the magnificent cast of academic luminaries assembled. My bibliography, as Vanessa reminding her, thoroughly daunting for this very freshly minted PhD. And I also had no idea, actually, why I had been invited in the first place. I'd published nothing at that point. I'd not yet attended a conference outside the UK. I was a complete unknown. I also do recall being invited at very short notice. So my assumption is that somebody dropped out. But who would that person be? And John Davis, who may have known me from Oxford via Michael Gilsonen, may well have been the person who recommended me. Unfortunately, I shall never know. But this meeting certainly changed my life. It was my first encounter with everybody here, plus Phil, plus Tony Seeger, plus Bruno Nettel, plus colleagues from Italy and from Croatia and Spain and from other academic worlds I knew little about, to my shame, and of course with Tullia. It made a move to the USA seem obvious and desirable for me. It gave me a very solid sense of intellectual community, a family, in fact. It also gave me a kind of life project, a space to make connections and have ideas, but a space formed by conversations that felt and still feel cosmopolitan, and that just dance and continue to dance, at least in my imagination, in Venetian light. That energy is still very much with me, I feel, and I'll always be grateful to Tullia and to the group, and feel very connected with this group. Now, I have very little to add that hasn't already been said by my distinguished colleagues. It's clearly a moment to reflect on the history of the group, where things started, where they have gone. It's a moment to reflect on what has been happening in the world as well, making the Mediterranean more and more of a focal point. And it's a moment to consider too what's been happening in our discipline and sub-disciplines. Nietzsche's "Il faut méditerraniser la musique" dictum now sounds a kind of clarion call across music studies as a whole, and not just ethnomusicology. And this affects the project, I feel, in ways we might consider. And it's a moment for reflexivity and critique, because it's always the moment for reflexivity and critique, of course, and Mediterraneanists are historically accomplished at this. This group has made a Mediterranean over the years that says as much about us as about that sea. And that us will always include and exclude, notice and fail to notice for reasons that are not immediately obvious at the time, if ever. I'd make two super quick observations, just to wrap up my comments here. The study group was, I would say, radically interdisciplinary in its early years. Tullia went out of her way to find anthropologists, classicists, and historians to connect with the group, as well as people involved with music beyond academia, as activists, as archivists and sound recordists, as filmmakers, media people, etc., etc. And if she couldn't get them to Venice, she would get them to publish in the online journal that we edited between us, Music and Anthropology, which is still up there on the web, by the way. The group has become over the years more of a group of ethnomusicologists, and I wonder what this says about the field and the discipline and its constellation of subdisciplines, and indeed about the very idea of interdisciplinarity itself. Is that 1990s vision of interdisciplinarity, 1990s, 30 years ago, so long ago, is that still possible and desirable? I find myself wondering what has been gained and what has been lost as a study group has assumed a more disciplinary sensibility. That's my first question. Secondly, a question about what it means to talk about geographical entities, land masses, seas, oceans, rivers as grounding concepts today. Do Mediterraneanists want to position themselves as connectors or transcenders of area studies ways of dividing up the world? Or do they want to develop, as it were, a theoretical or critical agenda that springs not just from today's fraught politics, war, migrancy, and climate, but from the Mediterranean world's own scholarly traditions, its own intellectual and cultural archive, as it were? The danger of the former, it seems to me, is a kind of romance with connection and life that can make us blind and deaf or oblivious in rather particular ways. The danger of the latter is a conversation that becomes circular, self-confirming, and enclosed. I think that these are both tough and also energizing questions. I think the group has found ways of posing these questions to itself in its various reinventions and rebirths, and I know that Vanessa and Salvatore are going to find energetic and creative ways of engaging with them to maintain, indeed, the energy and creativity of Ruth and Marcello and the many others who have kept things going when the umbilical cord connecting us with the Levi Foundation was suddenly disconnected. This is a very resilient group, I find myself reflecting, and I think it confronts these big questions with resilience. It's quite an emotional moment for me to see everybody here, to think about what I owe to this study group, to absolutely everybody here, to think about what Tullia might be thinking right now, where she with us and what she is in a sense, to think about those meals and what we learned about the world sharing them. It's impossible not to think about the powerless, indeed desperate state of the world at the moment, and yet equally impossible not to look forward to the next phase of this wonderful gatherings life. Thanks.
Thank you for those questions, because this is exactly what we want this day to be. Like, how do we gather from what the experience has been, and are there things that we could rethink, or should rethink, or want to rethink, or do we? It's the floor is open for discussion and questioning of this. So I'm really glad that you brought those up. There are some other people in the room that I know have been or were early on at the meetings in Venice, but weren't at those first two meetings. And so of those people, if any of them would like to say something, I know that there's Judith Cohen, who has also been continued coming to, I've seen her at every single symposium that I've been to, and there's Shoshana Vechshachak that I know had been to Venice as well, and Joaquina Lavajo is here as well, and I'm not sure if I'm missing anybody else that was here in those early days. Oh, Deborah Capchin is also present. So I'm really thrilled that that so many of you are able to come. And we have apologies from Ian Fenlon, who had some kind of technological Zoom problem where Zoom told him he hadn't updated, and he can't update, so he can't join. So he sends his deep regrets, but hopes to meet us all soon at some point. So yes, Olivier.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to say I'm sorry I have to leave also. I saw Edwin, and in the 90s, I started to study Ladino music with Shoshana in Tel Aviv University. And so it's a good remembrance also. But so I'm not, I'm quite recent in the study group. But when I came to Essaouira for the first time, as said by Martin, I met a family, which is very, very, very warm, and it was a fantastic experiment. And Séverine and I, we were very happy to welcome you, most of you, in Marseille. And so the first thing is, my feeling was a family, and the second feeling in Marseille, I saw a big new generation with young scholars. And so I'm very optimistic for the future. And I know that you and Salva, well, you are not alone. This is just I wanted to say. And regarding the publication of the proceedings, we are working on it with Séverine. She's in charge of the, I don't know if it's online or book collection, but we will make you a suggestion for trying to publish as much as papers as possible. But we were, I don't remember, 60 or 70s. So it's a huge work, and we will do our best, okay? And see you in Palermo, because I made a decision. I had another symposium in Tbilisi, and I say, no, I want to be with you in Palermo. So see you, and sorry for have to leave, okay? Best of you, and bonne année et tous mes meilleurs vœux.
Thank you, Olivier, for being here. Judith.
Hi. I was wondering, I sent you some pictures. Do you think I could show them? Because they're kind of, really old school pictures from that one time I was in Venice at the meeting. So here are some of us with Caroline Bithel, and I believe Shoshana and Ruth, and who's me, and who is that there? Wait, his name escapes me. Anyone? Do you know who that is over there? Okay, the name will come back to me in a minute. Let me see if I can get the next one. Hold on. I guess I should do these all at once. And here we have a whole bunch more people. You can see, I believe, same person, Ignacio, Caroline, Joška Chalita from Croatia, that I used to spend a lot of these meetings and other ethnomusicology meetings singing Croatian songs with in the hallways. And so there's a number like that. Manolo, Joaquina's husband, is there. There's another one with Joaquina. Hold on, let me see if I can put them up. Can you can't see these, can you? Can you see this one with me and Esperanza? Esperanza Bonet is the one that did the Alan Lomax Ibiza recording research with me. Here we have with Mark Slobin and Tullia, Shoshana, Joaquina. I was there not in my usual capacity as Sephardic music, but with my work in the Alan Lomax in Spain recordings. And that's why my friend from Ibiza was there with me. But what I really wanted to say was I was torn at the time between being wildly excited that my auto invitation was accepted. I wasn't invited so much as I wrote to Tullia and said, you're talking about islands. Islands is the theme for this year, 2004. And I would really love to talk about Mallorca and Ibiza and Alan Lomax's work in those two islands. And Tullia accepted it. And so I went. So I was torn between being wildly excited, but also not liking this exclusive aspect. So of course, on the one hand, I was thrilled that my travel expenses were paid and so on. But on the other hand, it had been starting, I'd followed the study group over the years, and it really felt like a kind of clique. And, you know, the kind of thing that if you weren't already in this inner circle, you weren't ever going to be in it. And I said, I invited myself basically, and Tullia accepted. And so I was actually delighted when it morphed into the format that it has now, which is the standard format of you submit a paper and there's a committee and all the rest of it. And I don't know, perhaps it's just hypocritical of me. And if I had gone to all the other early ones, if I had been invited, maybe I'd feel more nostalgic and, you know, feel that I was missing something. But I just wanted to say that it was an aspect that disturbed me. And several people I talked to in Canada and the States at the time who were working in different musics of the Mediterranean. So I think I've come to all of them since then. I don't know if I'll make Palermo, but it's been just like a joy to be with you in that Mediterranean town of Cambridge, which I have a special affection for because it's where I first met Vanessa in person, and so acquired not only a wonderful colleague, but a wonderful friend, in addition to my friend Ruth in Cambridge. And Essaouira I hadn't been back there since my hippie days in 1972. So that was really exciting. And it's just been great. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Judith. You were one of the people that I was afraid to meet in person. So you should know. Dinko, thank you for being here. And yes, I know that you're driving or something. So yes, but you can still put your camera on. Wonderful.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Salvatore, for organizing this exciting meeting and very important for me for three main reasons. I apologize to be speaking in the dark. I hope you can at least listen to my voice. And the first reason is that just 1 year after the first epic conference in Venice, you all mentioned during this meeting in 95. In 1996, I was the organizer of the second meeting on the same subject, Musicisti del Mediterraneo, Storia e Anthropologia. It happened in Bari, in southern Italy, and in the committee of the conference were almost all the creators of the group in Venice, Tullia and Roberto Leidi, and Franco Alberto Gallo, Lorenzo Bianconi, Ian Fenlon, and many others. This was so important for me to create this image of just one family. Musicologists can be working together from different sides and different competences. Philip Bollman wrote an incredibly interesting report of this conference that is still available online. The second reason was in 2016, when I was president of the IMS, the first joint conference in Naples, organized on the same topic, musicians in the Mediterranean Sea. It was a joint conference, ICTM, with this group, the Mediterranean Music Studies, with Ruth Davis that time, and I was able to propose the creation of a very similar, a brother study group in IMS, and we are still living and active as Mediterranean Music Studies in the IMS. And Salvatore Morra, since Naples, is acting as a liaison person in between the two groups. I hope in the future we can be working more in collaboration. In the meantime, we did also another quite important example of collaboration in between societies. In 2017, we were able to organize the first triple joint conference in Abu Dhabi with IMS, ICTM, and YAML. And this was the first of a series of joint conferences we intended to hold every 2 years on a specific topic, the Arabic countries. So to examine from different perspectives this important field, but intentions were frustrated. The second conference was programmed in Tunisia, but the political situation in Tunisia after 2019 and the COVID were impossible obstacles, and until now, no more joint conferences were held. The third important reason for me is that for an incredible coincidence and very by chance, I can announce you here that in 2024, Fondazione Levi in Venice will restart the publication of his journal, Musica e Storia, that was so important at the start of your study group, the ICTM, now ICTMD study group, Mediterranean, in Venice with this journal. And the Musica e Storia was stopped in 2011 was the last issue, but now Fondazione Levi will restart publications, and I am the chair, the coordinator of the journal. So I will be very welcoming all proposals from the both sides, anthropological and historical, of course, because the name of the publication is very symbolic, I think, for our groups. And why not to be thinking in the future, maybe in 2026, to organize another joint conference of the two study groups, the ICTMD and the IMS Mediterranean study groups in Venice at Fondazione Levi, to celebrate the 10 years then of our collaboration. Our next meeting will be in Malta next April 26-27. In this year, we will have 3 occasions to meet, different occasions, 1 in Malta and 2 in Spain, in Valencia, July, and in Elx in November.
but I would like to circulate more information through Salvatore to your group, and I hope to be more present with our members in your events. Thank you so much for this incredible occasion to be here with you.
Thank you, Dinko, for that. And yes, I think that it would be very interesting to think about doing something for the journal with the study group, especially because of the history, the long histories, and as well as potential collaborations. I wonder, since I wasn't there during the transitions, but this question that Martin raised about why are we seemingly less interdisciplinary now, and more ethnomusicological, and which I think is I'm very much an interdisciplinary person, and I'm always kind of banging my head against the wall with the like siloed things. So I'm very interested in bringing these things together. I wonder if maybe the history of the musicologists kind of starting their own parallel group has influenced in that siloing, and then how would we then be able to reinvigorate that aspect of continued conversation and methodological. I really liked what Nico talked about, the methodologies and the issues of methodological concerns, and how can that piece of it become a little bit more core in our explorations. I think that that's one of the things that would be very interesting for us to think about going into the future. I know that Deborah Caption has her hand up, and so I will now.
Hi everybody. So lovely to be here. I just wanted to follow up. I put something in the chat about a journal that I have been working with in the last 2 or 3 years called the Marquez Review. It's really the Eastern Mediterranean more than the entire Mediterranean, so it is a kind of regional journal. But it is about the literature, arts, culture of the Levant, the Middle East, and further, really much further. So you should not feel constrained if you don't work exactly in that area. I just encourage you to check it out. And following on the notion of interdisciplinarity, I might say transdisciplinarity and methodology, we might think about how we write, because you never can, to Judith's point, you never can get away from inner and outer, inclusive, exclusive. That's the nature of humanity and groups and no. All we can do is recognize those boundaries and exceed them when we can. But how we write affects who we touch. And, if we write in a very specialized manner, then we're just writing for each other. And I love reading your work, but I think at the moment, because of our political situation, but I think in any case, we need our work to have a larger impact. So the Marquez Review is not an academic journal. It's a public intellectual journal. Many academics publish there. If you want an exercise to get the jargon out of your writing, look at it, read it, and please consider contributing. Have your advanced graduate students contribute. Or I'm not on the editorial board. I'm on the international board, but it's run by a group of amazing people. They have a poetry section. They have music. They're actually looking for a music editor. So they're looking for a music editor, and it's a paid position, but nothing probably that would make a difference to your pockets. But if you have advanced graduate students who are really up to date on the pop culture of that area of the world, the Middle East, North Africa, going north, going further east, really, they're not too picky about that. And you have a really excited and on the ball graduate student who'd like a line on their CV and a few $1,000s in their pocket, please get in touch with me. And thanks again, Vanessa, for bringing us all together.
Thanks for being here. And I think it might be actually really interesting to have a curated maybe issue of the group, of the Mediterranean Music Studies group in Marcaz. I know the Marcaz review from Jordan. So I mean that's something that we could ask.
We could talk to him. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I just was going to say this is the right moment to also to introduce thank you, Deborah, but also to introduce the blog, which was launched by Tom Wester, who was in the room a few minutes ago, and it's now run by Cassandra and Giuseppe Sanfratello, which is more friendly, Deborah, in that way. It's more friendly approach rather than the academic journals. So
great.
Everyone to have a look at the blog as well. And I also would like to really answer Martin's question straight away. And what I think is that we'll consider for sure geography as an issue, Martin. Also in terms, let's think, for example, there are no, in this room today after 30 years, there are no colleagues from many countries of the Mediterranean, particularly North Africa. We all know the effort that Ruth made during these last 10 years to bring the group in Morocco, in North Africa. So I'm sure with Vanessa we will continue to move and to go towards places that are in a way underrepresented in this group today, and of course also the interdisciplinary question. We want really to work with historian again and also anthropologists in another way. So thanks, Martin. We'll think about.
I think I'll jump in since I don't see anybody else. But one of the issues that I think there's an issue with language, which I'm sure that many of you have confronted before. And as we just saw with the Palermo call for papers, it was only after we resent it out in French also that we got more North Africans submitting. So because we had only sent it out in English originally, we did not get as many North Africans. So the issue also is how do we negotiate this constant multilingualism, and any ideas and suggestions to maintain inclusivity but still continue being able to truly communicate, because if we did have some moments, for example in Marseille, where there were panels that were almost all French, and then some of the English speaking people that did not know French just sat out because there was no translation. So how do we actually negotiate that?
Can I say something about that, Vanessa? I was president for a while of the Canadian Society for Music Traditions, La Société Canadienne pour les Traditions Musicales. And we have always, first of all, we're required to by law, but we would have done it anyway. All our meetings and all our call for papers for every academic society in Canada, in fact, are bilingual in French and English. And people come from outside Canada who don't speak one or the other of the languages. If we have money, which is rare, then we do provide simultaneous translation. Otherwise, we do low-tech simultaneous translation, which is when you sit next to somebody who speaks the language and they whisper or they send you quick translations on the cell phone. But it's never been a serious problem, I think, because it's been like that since the beginning. So, I mean, if you want later on, I can look through some of the correspondence that we've had over the years about this and see how we've worked details out at different times. But it's been a given that all the calls for papers are in English and French, and both languages are equally accepted. And of course, this society, as Fanny knows, is associated with ICTMD as the Canadian section member, whatever the word is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the issue is then when do we stop at which language? Because then we could have Arabic and Italian and Turkish. So, yes, Ruth.
Well, sorry, I don't know. I've lost the gadget that tells how to raise my hand. Anyway, we did that. We were meticulous in Essaouira to all the calls, the announcements, everything were made in Arabic. We invited people to speak in Arabic, but nobody did. Yeah, I mean, it's choice, you know, it's also how people choose to communicate, not just how we invite them to communicate. And there are various reasons, I mean, various practical and other reasons. But yes, of course, to widen the possibility for different languages. I just have some brief thoughts about this idea, the point about interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, and I'm wondering whether our disciplines themselves are less sharply defined than they have been before. So in themselves are more multidisciplinary in nature. I mean, and I have to say, I haven't experienced, my experience isn't that it doesn't correspond to the one that Martin put across, although I see it's one thing how we define ourselves, and it's another thing to consider actually what are we doing and how are we thinking and how are we engaging. And I find there's a great deal more fluidity in that aspect. And then coming back to what Deborah has just said, you know, I love that expression. Did I write it down? An exercise in getting rid of your jargon or something like that. But I think we're all sort of understanding that, and I think I think there is gradually an understanding, a greater appreciation of different modes of presentation and of communication. I think in a way that the openness is coming from within, and maybe not just our discipline, but other disciplines too. It's just thoughts, observations.
Thank you. I see 3 hands, Svanibor, Martin, and then Marcello.
Sorry, I just wanted to update you that ICTMD is now using the artificial intelligence in that sense. We also have a committee for translations, and now you will see in the bulletin and also in the yearbook, also the articles like at least in one more language. Now it is at least when it comes to publishing, so this can be done just with one press and then you get a translation. And the other thing I just wanted to say, so this is the book that Salva referred to, and also Ruth, and you can find Ruth's excellent article in this volume about this study group. So it's about the first 7 decades of the ICTM. So it's quite a big baby. Thank you.
I think Ruth is exactly right, and puts in the way that I did, it can sound as though I was nostalgically reminiscing about the good old interdisciplinary days, which have now become something more kind of straightened out, as it were, in disciplinary terms. But I certainly didn't mean that. I think what disciplinarity and interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity means now is very different to what it meant 30 years ago. Ethnomusicology is hugely changed. I mean, what is possible to do and carry on calling yourself an ethnomusicologist now is not what it was 30 years ago. So it's this terrain, this disciplinary terrain, is constantly changing, but I think it does raise interesting questions. The other thing not to forget is just the economics of this. But I mean, Tullia was able to invite anybody to the Levi Foundation conferences because she could put her hands in these very deep pockets, and of course, just get people to travel from all over the world to Venice, whereas now with conferences where people have to pay their own ways or get their universities or colleges to pay for them, I think that I mean, I think that that's had an effect as well. But I do remember those early conferences, those early meetings in Venice as having a really diverse cast of characters. Yeah. Oh, as far as translation is concerned, I think by next year we'll all be in an AI world where simultaneous translation software just makes this question completely moot.
Marcello, yes, please unmute yourself. Yes.
Okay, just a thought about interdisciplinary cross-disciplines work. My impression is that the more research focuses on interactions, confrontations, and the rejection, well, almost inevitably, the questions that Martin Paul suggested will have to be addressed and answered in some way. How can one deal with interactions, confrontations, and rejection among and between cultures without extending one's view to areas and disciplines that inevitably need to be approached?
I'll quickly say about interdisciplinarity and thinking about those early meetings, I actually tend to sort of take the John Dewey pragmatic approach, is that one becomes interdisciplinary by doing it. And that was characteristics that we didn't sit and debate whether we were going to be interdisciplinary. We just sat fueled by good food and wine and did it. And I stand by that response to interdisciplinarity. I just a quick reference, perhaps as the former co-editor of ethnomusicologists, the journal of the IMS, which has for many years published in 5 languages. And has developed recent policies for making translated articles available within websites in countries where scholars might have been felt forced to write in English when it was not common. So they're really wrestling with this problem and have done so extremely effectively, and it might be well worth sort of comparing, speaking. That's another reason to listen to Dinko's and to meet with Dinko's study group.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm very happy to participate to this important meeting. It is a celebration, an anniversary, very important. I'm very happy to be here with you. I hope to see some of you here in Palermo in the middle of the Mediterranean in September for the next our meeting. And I think that the work that you all together we are going to do is very important and a beautiful way to go on. Thank you very much.
I want to close the formal part of the meeting now and maybe leave the Zoom room open so that if people want to continue talking, we can talk in a more informal way, as if we had a glass of wine and a table that we were enjoying together, some food around dinner at a conference. But I also really wanted to thank everybody for your words, your insights, your ideas, your rememorations of that very exciting moment that has impulsed and all the publications that have come from those, and even there's some publications that Ruth edited that weren't mentioned. I thought actually, Ruth, that you were going to mention them, so I didn't make a PowerPoint.
I was skating. Sorry, I was skating around, not knowing what I was repeating, what was going to come, what I'd missed.
It's okay.
And thank you for stopping me. I could have gone on.
I feel remiss that we didn't mention the editing work that you have done, but so thank you.
And yours in the pipeline from Tangier, yeah.
Yes, we have things in the pipeline, and we will continue, and we invite everybody from those of you that have not been as involved in recent years, come back. We would love to have you more, and come to Palermo or to the next one. You will be on the mailing list. So we're thrilled to have been able to do this, because I feel like it's a real moment of connection and rerouting to something that had so much promise and fruitfulness, and that I think will continue to give fruit. So thank you all so very much for your investment and your commitment and your gift to us. Thank you.